Welcome back to the Generalist, guys. Let's get quickly into the episode. Today's episode's a little bit longer than usual. I wanted to split it up into 2 episodes, but I couldn't find a good place to split it up, so I'm just going to release it all as one. It's a little bit long. You can listen to it in parts if you want, or not, honestly. You can do whatever you want. I had my friend Rob Sarenson, who at the time, this is like the 3rd or 4th episode I recorded. I don't know why I didn't release it earlier, but at the time, he had just come back from a 5-week trip in Peru, where he was in the jungle with a tribe called, I forget the name of the tribe, but it will be in the podcast. The Shipibo. It's called the Shipibo. And he'll tell us a little bit about his experience there and how it changed him. We also had Daniel Flagging, who was from the first episode, the Tibetan Buddhist episode. And he came in and sat in and talked a little bit, and we all had a lot of fun together. So, enjoy.
Welcome to the Generalist. A show with a man who knows very little bit about a lot. A man who specializes in nothing in particular. A man who knows that he knows nothing. A man who can be described as non-specific. And to top it off, he narrates his own intros. This is The Generalist with your host, Saul Ackerman.
So we're sitting here, welcome to the Generalist. Thank you guys for doing this. We're sitting here with Rob Sarenson and our old friend Dan Flagging from the Buddhist episode, which I assume I will release before this, but who knows. Well, Rob went to Peru for about 3 months. Is that correct? A day?
5 weeks.
Rob Sarenson went to Peru for 3 months. 5 weeks. Really? 5 weeks? That's it?
That's it.
It seemed like a lot longer. We missed you. And he did all sorts of shit, which we're going to find out about today. So, welcome to the Generalist, Rob.
Thank you, Saul. It's lovely to be here.
And welcome to the Generalist again, Dan.
Hi. Thanks.
All right. Why don't you tell us a little bit about, firstly, what made you decide to go down to Peru?
So, I had been to Peru before, back in 2007. And I sort of did like a spiritual tour down there. So we toured Cusco, we toured the Sacred Valley, we went to Machu Picchu, and I decided then and there that I was going to return to Peru at some point. And knew people that had gone, the group called Healer to Healer, down to both Guatemala and to Peru, and they had worked a certain company site, in Peru, in the jungle, called the PITT Institute, and they had done some healing exchange with them and at the same time got to experience some local shamanic Peruvian medicine. So, I mean, that was back in 2010.
And to clarify, you went with an acupuncture group?
I did not, no. I went independently with a group. I didn't know anyone from the group, so it was a group from New York. It was originally designed to be a 2-week trip, but I decided that I wanted to go longer than 2 weeks, so I ended up doing closer to 5 weeks. And I went down, 2.5, 3 weeks early to start the diet, basically, that I was going to be on.
I'm sorry, you were talking about this time.
This time, yeah.
Oh, no, I was curious. The first time, you were just explaining how you were the first time.
Yeah, the first time was not with acupuncturist either. That was with my mentor. This was when I was living in North Carolina.
Okay.
So I went with my mentor and his boss and a group of, sort of spiritually minded people. And it was really cool. We got to visit a whole bunch of sacred sites. We worked actually with an Andean shaman. And did
Andean?
From the Andes, from the mountains.
Oh, Andes, I got it.
As opposed to a jungle shaman. Yeah, that was back in 2007. And then this time, I went to the jungle part of Peru.
Is that in the Amazons?
Yeah, so the sort of western portion of the Amazon extends into the northeastern corner of Peru. And the big city there is called Iquitos, which you can't get to by road. You can't get to it overland travel. Your options are either to fly in, which is what I did, or you can travel by river. Because apparently Iquitos was a big trade hub when the rubber industry was still using rubber from trees and not from petroleum products.
Is that the Orinoco River that runs through there?
No, it's a branch of the Amazon, or what will become the Amazon later river.
Got it.
So, yeah, apparently Iquitos was, if not the first, it was one of the first cities in Peru to get electricity. So I flew down from New York to Lima, and then from Lima to Iquitos. So Iquitos is, there's a road that goes from Iquitos to a little village called Nauta, which is about 100 kilometers away. And so the camp where I spent the month was at kilometer marker 72 on that road. Yeah, so it was really great. I flew into Iquitos and I stayed in Iquitos one night, and it was totally different from the rest of my Peru experience, which was mostly mountains and...
The rest was mountains. Iquitos was more of a city?
Iquitos was jungle climate, not mountain climate.
I see.
That's what I mean. So basically, when you land in Iquitos, there's not one of those runways that comes out and attaches to the side of the plane, one of those jetways. Basically, they wheel stairs up to the plane's door, and you get out and you go down the stairs and you go across the tarmac into the terminal. And so when I stepped out onto the top of the staircase, it smelled exactly like I had just stepped into a greenhouse in summer.
Wow.
So it was about 7:30 in the evening, and the air was super humid. It was probably still in the low 80s, 8 degrees, and the air was close and thick, and it smelled like a greenhouse.
That's really cool. So I sort of interrupted you before, but
Mm-hmm.
you were telling me what made you decide to go there in the first place.
Well, again, I had intended to go back to Peru ever since my first trip there, and this time I wanted to go to experience the jungle part. Have an experience working with Peruvian jungle medicine and the shamans down there. One of our friends, Peter, went to both Peru and he went to some trips to Guatemala. He was telling me about his experience in Peru, and it just sort of stoked the fire. But that was, I want to say, 2010, 2011 when they went. And I ended up going down with a completely different group, with a completely different shaman, but the timing was right, and so I took the semester off from teaching at our acupuncture school and headed down. Flew down February 1st.
So clarify for us, what exactly is a shaman?
So these shaman, or they wouldn't call themselves shaman, they would call themselves curanderos.
Curanderos. So in Spanish, a curar means to cure or to heal. So curandero would be somebody who heals, correct?
Right, exactly. So they were the medicine men, the doctors, right?
And do they come from a specific tradition?
Yes. So these that I worked with were part of the Shipibo tribe. So they were all Shipibo that we were working with. And the tradition was the Shipibo tradition. So yes, they were of a definite lineage. And so the camp is owned by a guy named Don Enrique. And he and his brother's name is Don Miguel, and they sort of co-run the camp. They're both curanderos.
Right.
So they own and operate the camp. And I've described the experience that I had down there to several friends already, and in my mind I have it divided into different sections. So for example, I have the part that's about the medicines I did, and then I have the part that's about the ayahuasca ceremonies that I did, and then I have the part that's about the spiritual stuff that I experienced, and then there's the cultural stuff of Shipibo culture and speaking Spanish. And
so that's really cool. I do want to get into all of that,
Mm-hmm.
but before we get into that, I'm curious to know what were you expecting when you went down there, and were your expectations different than what happened? And was that good or bad?
I had expectations that were based on a retreat that I did in Colorado in 2007, where I went on a spiritual retreat that was led by a woman from India, a spiritual leader from India named Saima. And that was an awesome, amazing trip. It was an amazing experience. We were meditating every day, doing either yoga or Tai Chi every day. It was in the mountains, so we went on this overnight camp to over 9,000 feet, and it was very spiritual, very, very spiritual.
What do you mean by spiritual?
So working with a guru, you're wearing all white when you're in darshan with the
Oh, so it
guru.
is more of the Hindu tradition.
Oh yeah, this was definitely part of the Hindu
I see.
tradition.
That's interesting. And this was in Peru?
No, this was in Colorado. But
I'm
telling
sorry.
you
Right, I'm sorry.
that
I
my
confused.
expectations of this trip were sort of based on my experience that happened in Colorado.
Got it.
So I expected, things like that it would be very, very spiritual, very holy. I'd be working with, medicine men that were also spiritual leaders. And I expected to come back to my life in New York and have sort of a reverse culture shock coming back. So in other words, having this tremendously open heart and being immensely sensitive to energy. And so when I came back from Colorado from this retreat, I couldn't be in the same room as a television for a couple of days at least. And then finally when I could sit down, I just noticed that all the shows on television, like sitcoms, things that I had previously found entertaining and funny, I found to be really, really assaulting, actually. And they're so mean to each other and all this sort of thing.
What do you think about that? Do you think that is and Dan, I'll bring you in on this one also, but do you guys think this is a particularly healthy or unhealthy or neither thing where you can't, because I get the idea of spirituality and being kind of up here, but to me there's a necessity to also be able to be down here, and that is true spirituality when the whole thing is one thing.
Sure.
But I do notice that you get some people who are spiritual and they're like, oh, I can't even relate to the earthly things, if you will.
Right. They can't operate in the real world.
Right. And do you think that is a healthy thing, unhealthy thing, or neither?
I think that it's just a phase. It's like a step on the journey that happens to people. I think a lot of people in our culture here in the West, when they get into spiritual stuff, they feel like they need to abandon Western culture because there's something wrong with it.
Right.
And that they need to adopt this other culture. And so they start wearing the clothes of those people and like talking like them, and like they fill their house with like artifacts from that place. But like that's just trying to like adopt somebody else's culture as yours, and it's not actually yours. It's
It's
just
kind of like you were talking to me when I asked you if you were Tibetan Buddhism, and you say Tibetan Buddhism is for Tibetan people.
Yeah, I mean the idea, the heart and the soul of it is very different from the external things of it. Like in those places, those cultures, spirituality is just part of the everyday thing. Those people don't wake up and think like, man, I'm so spiritual.
Right.
Like they don't, and like they don't get ready to do their spiritual rituals and spiritual practices thinking like, oh yeah, it's time to get spiritual. Like they're just like, that's part of their culture, and like their life is infused with a sort of lens that is the way that they look at things that helps them to get to the next step. Because I feel like spirituality is really just about growing. It's just helping you grow. It's not about like escaping reality and going to some otherworldly realm and transcending everything. It's not like we're in the Matrix. I mean, I think I said that last time. It's like,
yeah, a lot of people do. I do see that a lot with people who talk about spirituality. They're like, oh, we have to escape this world, and this world is bullshit. And I disagree.
Yeah.
But that's respectfully, of course. So back to you, Rob. You were saying you got back, you were having a hard time watching TV and all that stuff.
This was after the Colorado trip.
Yeah.
And so again, my expectations for my Peru trip were in large part, informed by my Colorado trip. And I found that the experience was quite different in Peru. Not better, not worse, just different and still amazing. I'm still wide open, and I'm still very sensitive to energy. So, for example, Dan and I, we went to get some food after he was done with his exam today. We walked into a place called Open Kitchen, which is like cafeteria-style food and things like that, and it was absolutely jam-packed, even though it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Or what in my mind was jam-packed.
That's why I
Dan's
smiled.
sitting here smiling at me.
Yeah, you forget you're in New York.
To me, I've been in the jungle for 5 weeks. I mean, I got back 2 weeks ago, and to me it was jam-packed, and there was so much just stimulation of every sights and sounds and smells, and it all hit me, and I felt assaulted, especially in my third chakra. That's really where I felt it. And
Tell me about the chakra. I know a little bit about the chakras, but I don't know enough.
It's
the third chakra is the third one from top to bottom, or from bottom to top?
From bottom to top. It's the solar plexus chakra.
Solar plexus.
It's not terribly important. Just for me, that's where I tend to perceive a lot of energy. That's
Okay.
the one that's sort of a little bit more active for me than the other ones. That's just where I felt it. And so I actually had to excuse myself and leave open kitchen and sort of stand outside. And even when I was outside, I mean, the foot traffic was crazy, and then there was construction going on, and all these jackhammering and noises and
jungle to New York is kind of
right.
the two extremes.
Well, but what's fascinating is, I mean, New York is a jungle as well. It's just a very different type of jungle than the
Yeah, you raise a
Peruvian
really
jungle.
interesting point that I think it was Alan Watts who said it. I know I bring him up a lot. He was talking about buildings and stuff like that and saying how they're not particularly different than a bee's nest. It's definitely nature. It's part of what we build, and we make this, and it is still part of nature. It doesn't seem like it because we've constructed it in such a way that feels so unnatural.
Mm-hmm.
But it is nature. It's our way of nesting, if you will.
Right.
But anyway, go on.
Right. So I am still very, very open to energy, especially. But the trip itself was very different, and it wasn't collectively spiritual. I think that's a good term for it. In other words, spirituality wasn't really the focus there. Now, there were individuals having spiritual experiences, but it wasn't like we came together with the intention, even in the ayahuasca ceremonies, it was not like coming together with the intention of having a spiritual experience. Like, it wasn't like darshan,
Right.
where you'd sit down with a guru and there'd be sort of a discourse given and a blessing and then maybe some Q&A, things like that. It was not like that. It was very different. So while there was definitely a spiritual experience that I experienced, it was very different from my Colorado trip.
So was your spiritual experience the same as the ayahuasca experience, or are those two separate experiences?
They're related to each other. The ayahuasca
Okay.
ceremonies were definitely a part of the spiritual experience, but there was more than just the ayahuasca. So we'll say Iquitos, because Iquitos is a crazy city. It's really wild, especially I'll talk more about the Berlin market, which is insane. So basically, at mile marker 72, basically what we did was one of the facilitators for my group and his girlfriend and I all traveled to the camp together. And what you do is there are taxi services that travel between Iquitos and Nauta. Right? So you get in there and you pay 10 Peruvian soles, which was $2.90. So you get in this van, and this van sat 10 people plus the driver. And you basically sit and wait until the van fills up. When the van fills up, they pull out of town, and wherever you want to stop, you tell them here, and they let you off.
That's awesome.
So at mile marker 72, this is our stop. So we got out, and the road between Iquitos and Nauta is paved. It's like a regular blacktop road. I mean, it washes out periodically,
Yeah.
but they're construction guys repairing it or whatever. And so one of the first things I learned about the jungle is that the topsoil of the jungle is only a very thin layer. It's only about a foot and a half.
Yeah, that's the thing with the Amazons.
Right. And underneath the topsoil, where basically all the plants are growing, is clay. And clay, you can't grow things in clay. Right. So all of the life of the jungle is sustained by basically a foot and a half of topsoil. Right. And so the road, which I was told used to be a single footpath into the jungle, was now bulldozed. So it was a nice wide road size, but it was clay. And while they're in the process of adding a calcium salt to it that will sort of harden the clay, if it rains, you get muddy clay.
Oh, wow. That must be tough to drive through.
Yes, absolutely. So, yes, there are all kinds of stories with the little motor car that they have, which is basically like the front end of a motorcycle attached to a little tiny, flatbed.
Right.
And so the walk from the road to camp takes between 30 and 40 minutes. It's long, and it goes uphill, it goes downhill. And there are parts where rainwater collects, and they put, wooden boards across the road so that you can get your footing, your foothold. But the road definitely is sometimes in better condition, sometimes in worse condition. But the fascinating thing, one of the first things that I noticed, so I had two pieces of luggage. One was my regular JanSport backpack, which this guy Luke, who was one of the facilitators, carried for me. And then I bought this gigantic Patagonia duffel bag. So like the biggest one they make, the 120 liters.
Right.
And I had it, 3/4 full. And it was heavy. I don't remember it exactly, but it was heavy. And I was wearing that like a backpack. And I was talking with Luke and his girlfriend the entire walk. And at one point I noticed we were walking uphill on, kind of slippery footing, which makes it difficult. And I'm carrying my pack. And at the same time, I'm telling a story. And all of a sudden I just stopped and I said, "This is absolutely amazing." And they were like, "What's amazing?" I was like, "I'm walking uphill with this really heavy pack on my back, and I'm talking and telling a story, and I'm not breathless, I'm not winded."
Do you think that's because the air is cleaner
Yes.
there?
Not cleaner. The air is, the word I use is vivifying.
Vivifying. You would use a word like that.
The word that I use.
Well, what I mean by that is
Well, there's so much oxygen because of those plants.
There's so much life force down there. There's
Wow.
so much life force, and yes, there's the oxygen content. I mean, and you guys know me. I am not one that exercises. I don't go to the gym. Right? This walk should have winded me.
Right.
Right? I
Gym.
should have been. Exactly. What's a gym? Is that J-I-M? Is that a guy's name?
Who's
Anyway,
Jim?
Who is this Jim you speak of? Anyway, so this walk should have winded me, but it didn't. I was able to walk uphill with this heavy pack on my back and have a conversation and not be short of breath at the same time. So you guys are like, okay, what's the big deal? But
No,
to me,
I can
that's
see
like
that.
That's a huge
Yeah, I
deal.
can
No,
see that.
totally. And were you at a high elevation at the time or not?
No.
Okay.
Jungle's not at high
Oh, you're at the
elevation
jungle.
at
That's
all.
right. The jungle would not be at
yeah.
high elevation.
If I was at high elevation, I definitely would have been winded.
Mm.
But so that was one thing that I sort of remarked on. And then we got to camp, and there are chickens running around, which to a boy from Brooklyn is quite different. So what I would talk about as the trip went on is all the ways in which the jungle would shift your definition of normal, or my definition of normal. I'll try to speak in the first person. So, chickens running around, that's not normal to me, right? And there's a mother hen with 10 baby chicks following her, and so.
Now, in this area, are people living in this area?
Yes, at the camp there are quote unquote permanent structures.
Because I feel like chickens aren't really a jungle animal, are they? Unless somebody was keeping them.
No, they were the Shipibo tribe. They were keeping them there.
That's why I was
they were
confused.
domesticated chickens. Yeah.
Got it. Are there such thing as wild
I
chickens?
was just gonna say it's not wild, ravenous chickens.
Wild killer chickens.
Gotta watch out for those motherfuckers.
Cluck you up.
They cluck you up, nice. So I was expecting really to be roughing it. I was expecting to sleep in a hammock and outhouse toilets and that sort of thing. But actually, the camp was quite nice. They had 2 bunks, two dormitories that they had 10 rooms each. They had flushing toilets. You couldn't flush the toilet paper, which was a little weird. So you had to sort of
Yeah, it was the same in Guatemala.
Yeah, you had to throw it in a trash bin next to the toilet. But they had bed frames with mattresses, and
That's a real reason why they make you go on a diet.
Yeah.
Nobody wants that sticky toilet paper shit.
But believe me, that sometimes doesn't help, depending on what phase of the diet you're on. So there were mosquito nets over every bed, and at first I was like, "Oh, mosquito nets! This is awesome! This is going to be straight out of Africa, your African safari." But what I learned pretty quickly was that these particular mosquito nets were made from like nylon, so they're like plastic.
Right.
And when you lie underneath them and you pull them around you and you tuck them in so the cockroaches don't run across your face at night, they reflect your body heat back at you. And when it's 85 degrees with 90 to 100% humidity, you don't want your body heat reflected back at you. So
I would never be able to sleep.
Yeah, you hate the humidity.
Oh my god.
Well, and so that was another, shift of normalcy for me was, adjusting from New York weather. Now, granted, we've had a really wacky winter that hasn't been very cold at all, to, like I said, mid 80s with really high humidity. And I also detest hot weather with high humidity. But eventually you adjust. And so there were 2 dormitories with 10 rooms each, but there were also little huts that they called tambos. So there were, let's see, 3, 4, 5 tambos altogether. And these were wooden, so they were made with boards that were cut from jungle trees, and they're cut by hand with a chainsaw by eye. So you cut the boards from trees with a chainsaw.
An electric chainsaw or a hand chainsaw?
No, a gas chainsaw.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like a handheld chainsaw.
It's not so much by hand, but I hear what you're saying.
By eye is what I meant with the chainsaw.
I hear what you're saying, right?
Right, so
They use their eye.
pretty amazing. And
Is it like Superman with a laser vision? The chainsaw is just for sound, because it distracts them. It's their music.
Let me tell you.
well, actually, that was the first sound I noticed when I got to camp. It was
Chainsaws?
the chainsaws going, yeah, which was kind of depressing.
Very
But,
spiritual.
Not
Yeah,
not people in your camp somewhere else in the jungle.
both
Oh,
people in the camp where I was, because they were building 3 more tambos.
I was gonna say I don't imagine they're using that much lumber though in your camp. It's not like a metropolis.
No, and
But you know what? That goes back sort of to the idea that I was talking about before of what we conceive as spirituality versus what is spirituality. Yeah, you can use a fucking chainsaw, and that doesn't make you non-spiritual.
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
I mean, what I was going to say is, let me lay this out really, really sooner rather than later. The Shipibo tribe, by and large, are not all that spiritual as a whole.
Well, then fuck everything I just said.
well, when you say they're not spiritual, you mean they're not walking around all day going, "Bless you, my child."
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, that's...
They are spiritual in the way that they believe in plant spirits, which we'll get into soon. But they're not spiritual in the way... I mean, they're not concerned with environmental conservation. They're not concerned with... They burn plastic bottles in campfires. They cut down trees. I mean, they are not interested in recycling. They're not interested in... You know, and I don't mean to correlate this with spirituality. It's just that their thinking is not...
Is that what you would imagine as spiritual?
I mean, it's
Yeah.
tough to not be judgmental when we're talking about this here, this topic, but they're not. I mean, there's a lot of poverty down there.
Yeah, it's a different
There's
culture. You can't really judge.
Right, exactly.
You really can't judge. It's a very different story.
It's a completely different culture.
Yeah, we're in a very comfortable place to go around saying like, "Oh, you shouldn't do this," when
Right.
that's what they got.
But even, I mean, you know, there's an American woman that lives down there at the camp, and she sort of, I don't know, is the director, I guess you would call it. She sort of keeps tabs on people's comings and goings, and she's been trying to get them to compost for years and years.
That's cool.
And they don't do it though. They don't adopt it. They have a few solar panels that are set up. One is set up to keep the phone on all day, but the other ones are not hooked up to anything, you know. So but there are also aspects of Shipibo culture that are not. So for example, it's still very machismo. You know, the man is the head of the household. The woman's opinion is not as important as the man's. The women, by and large, are responsible for raising children and cooking and cleaning the house. And
Right.
There's a lot of infidelity with the men, so they have lots of children, both in and out of wedlock.
You know, it's interesting. I've been told before that that's very common in Latin American culture, and I did not experience that myself growing up. I'm from Venezuela. I don't know if I've said that on this podcast before.
So anyway, you know, that I just wanted to throw that out there right away. And so, yeah, it's not like we're sitting with a guru in Darshan and you know, talking about reincarnation or
Right.
you know, the soul or things like that.
But this is like coming back to, I keep being afraid to jump in with this because it's going to take us down like a totally different.
It's alright. Wherever we go, we go. We can always do another one where we talk about other shit. Don't worry about it. Enjoy yourself.
This
Conversation.
All right. This is like you can't talk about like this with what the things that you just said without defining what is spiritual, and like that's like a whole, I almost said bag of worms, can of worms. That is like, you might as well not even go there, because like how can anybody come in and say this is spiritual, that's not spiritual? That's like being, not to bring him up again, but that's like being like the Donald Trump of spirituality.
Well,
Like you're like,
Sorry, I like that.
it's just like because
I'm the most spiritual. Right? Everyone loves me. I'm spiritual.
believe me,
I'm the spiritualist.
my chakras are huge.
I can be spiritual.
we have the best spirituality.
I have the best spirituality.
the best steaks.
Trump holy water.
Trump
Holy water.
I drank it and I spit it out, and now it's Trump holy water.
Trump holy water.
Yeah, just
But
give
like,
it time.
one of the reasons that I got into Zen when I was like 14, 15 is because the Zen monks were like roaming around the countryside drunk, and I was like, that's kind of awesome. And yet they were incredibly like wise, incredibly sensitive beings who, you know, they spent who knows how much time meditating and learning from their masters, doing you know, quote unquote spiritual stuff, and like, you know, elevating their minds and their awareness.
It reminds me of the Zen monk. I guess monk
Ikkyo.
is in the right road, but Ikkyo Sojo, who we've spoken about before, and he has there's a story about Ikkyo Sojo. He's a really cool guy. Definitely check him out if you have a chance. But towards the end of his life, when he's talking to students, he says something along the lines of, "You can go and sleep with whores and drink alcohol, and that is Zen. Or you can go into the woods and meditate alone, and that's also Zen. But if you go around telling other people what to do, then you're my enemy." Yeah. Whenever I use the word spirituality, generally speaking, in conversation, I'll be very careful. I'll be like, for lack of a better word, because spirituality is very loaded, partially because of religion and partially because of how people interpret spirituality in their own lives, which is not necessarily how you mean it or how you mean it or how I mean it.
It comes from your heart. You know, it's a feeling. It's something you can't talk about. It's something you can't describe. It defies words, and it defies traditions. It defies rituals. It defies a practice. It defies any kind of structure whatsoever. And it comes from living life and experiencing things and learning through awareness. There was a saying in tracker school. Sorry to cut you off. There was a saying that we had in tracker school that oh shit, I said the name of the place. Oh well. That I didn't say the name of the place in the first episode because I didn't want people to correlate me with them.
I see.
Whatever. I'm not affiliated with them in any way. I used to work there, but the guy who, not Tom, but his teacher said he had a saying like, "By your awareness, you shall judge them." Meaning, like, you can't judge people by any other quality really, except like how aware they are in each moment. Yeah. You know, like how unconscious or conscious they are about what's going on around them, and you know, it's just. I don't know why we got sidetracked with this, but I felt like I had to jump in because
I think
there's this idea that people have, especially people who are like getting into quote unquote spiritual stuff. No, I'm not talking about you. You've been doing this for a long time. I'm talking about people who are like really new to this whole idea of being spiritual or doing spiritual things. Is that like there is a way to do spiritual stuff, and there's like, and the other stuff that's not that is like not spiritual. Right. Like, oh, you can't play video games. You can't watch TV. That's not spiritual. Like, don't you know, like, the radiation that's coming out of that and the subconscious whatever programming that the Matrix is trying to beam into your what?
You're just talking about a very specific person.
Oh, no, I'm talking about a lot of people.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That person just happens to represent everything that I'm talking about. He's like a walking embodiment of what I'm talking about. Like, just because you wear a poncho knitted by people in Peru doesn't mean that now you wear spiritual clothing. Right. You know, like... Anyway.
So I agree, and we should definitely have this conversation again, but I'm going to sidestep all of this stuff by saying two things. Number one, like I said, it's difficult to talk about the cultural differences without a bit of judgment creeping in, although I will just say that I'm going to lump it under the category of readjusting normal, right? That sort of redefining normalcy. And the other piece about I'm not sort of interested right now in going into my definition of spirituality, but to say that's why I prefaced this whole thing, and I'm glad you asked, Saul, before, about expectations. And so my expectations were of the Colorado trip that I had, which in my world, in my view, and my definition was a very spiritual trip. Right. And so... to compare and contrast, this wasn't, it was a personally spiritual trip, but it was not a group spiritual trip. that's so in my definition, in my comparison to other trips that I've taken, that's kind of what I mean. I don't mean to say, oh, the Shipibo are not spiritual. The trip that I took was different, a different level, a different kind of spirituality from my Colorado trip. Let's just put it that way.
Do you feel like this, regardless of its spirituality or lack thereof, had a big effect on you, a big change in your life?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
Positive, I hope.
Positive, for sure.
Yeah.
This had a huge impact, which, I'm also happy to talk about. So anyway, I lived in one of these tombos, which were made of wood. They were on stilts. They didn't have windows. They had mosquito netting, so they were sort of open to the elements. But they had banana leaf roofs, and at the top, at the peak, because it was sort of a triangle peak roof, it was open a little bit. So when it rained, if the wind blew in the right direction, I'd get a few drops of rain on me while I slept.
I'm guessing it rained a lot.
It rained almost every day.
Yeah.
It was funny because when I got down there, I was talking to this woman that lives down there. She's an American expat. And I asked her about the weather. And she said, well, in the jungle, every day is beautiful. And in the jungle, every day it rains. And she was right. Some parts of it just depends. If you don't like the weather, it's like what they say about Ireland. If you don't like the weather, just wait 5 minutes. Kind of the same deal here.
New Orleans, too.
Venezuela was like that also. We called it nubes pasajeras, which means passing clouds. They just come, it rains for 5 minutes, and then it's sunny again.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it would rain longer. Like overnight, sometimes there were a couple of thunderstorms and things. There was actually a thunderstorm for my first ayahuasca ceremony, which was really
that must
amazing.
be interesting.
Yeah.
You were living in a hut with banana leaves.
Yeah, banana leaf roofs, yeah. And
I didn't mean like your roommates were banana leaves.
That's what I imagined he said that. So you were living in a hut with bananas.
So the mosquitoes were vicious down there, vicious. And they had two types. These little brown ones, which were slow and dumb. Right? So at one time I slapped 5 of them with one slap. And then they had the larger black with white striped mosquitoes, which are fast, they're smart, they're vicious. So I was covered with mosquito bites, arms and legs anyway. And they also have what the English speakers call chiggers. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with chiggers.
I recently heard of them for the first time, which is surprising because they camp all the time, and to the best of my knowledge, I've never had them.
They suck.
We don't have them in the northern part of America, but they exist in the south. But the chiggers that we have in America are very different from these Peruvian chiggers. So apparently the chiggers in America that we have, basically, they cause spots that are super itchy. They look like mosquito bites, but if you scratch them, they spread. So really there are things that you can put on topically to stop the itch, but really the only way to treat them is to not scratch, which takes a tremendous effort of will.
I bet.
Do you know how chiggers work?
No.
It's horrifying.
Yeah, they burrow into your skin and lay eggs.
No, well, they do burrow in your skin. Do you know how they burrow into your skin?
No.
They throw up on you, and it dissolves your skin, and then it creates this little well that they then drink the dissolved skin out of.
Oh, that's lovely.
And then the thing that itches is not them doing that. It's the healing process of that little hole.
Oh.
And they don't have an Amazonian plant that they use to make the itching better or heal the wound.
Well, they do have a remedy to relieve the itching. But let me start by saying that the Shipibo don't get chiggers. Huh. Their skin is super tough apparently, and they're just for some reason not bothered by the chiggers.
That's racist.
Evolution is racist.
Today's topic.
So the remedy for itchy mosquito bites or itchy chigger bites that they used was actually gasoline.
Oh my god.
With some plants dissolved in, not
I'm
dissolved,
pretty sure gasoline does not grow in the Amazons. At least not on trees.
So one of the things, again, redefining normal, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that the Shipibo are really good at is incorporating new things into their old traditions. And so gasoline, Clorox, that sort of thing. So yeah, so they would be.
Right. The healing gasoline.
I thought that was so interesting. I would love to see people's faces like super hippied out, like organic green smoothie drinking people when you tell them that like little Peruvian people drink gasoline. It's like awesome.
They don't drink it.
You said to diet it.
You can diet it, yes, but that's different than using it topically as medicine.
I see.
I'll talk about the diet. So I actually gave a massage to one of the women in our group. So we're talking about using gasoline as medicine, and one of the women in our group, when she would get bitten by a mosquito, she would get these gigantic welts, like the size of a $50, for those of you that are old enough to remember what a $50 is.
Only you would compare it to the size of a $50.
The size of a Susan B. Anthony coin.
Larger than a quarter is what
Special edition.
And so she was desperate, to get something to help with the itching. So someone handed me a milk jug that was filled with gasoline and plants. So I think there was Toei in there. I think Mapacho was
So they use it as a
topical...
a solvent to extract the stuff out of it.
Which makes sense. I mean,
But
in
also-
a lot of cultures, even in Chinese medicine, we use alcohol. So it's not quite the same, but it's the same kind of idea.
Right. But also the gasoline itself has healing and protective properties.
So interesting.
Isn't it?
Yeah. And we'll talk about this a little later when I'm describing the diets. So the specific diets that you can do.
Now, is this processed gasoline or petroleum?
It's processed. It's like
Wow,
what you
interesting.
would
You
run
pump
your
out
car
of
on.
yeah.
Yeah. What you would run your car on. So yeah, there are ways, and she said it really. I mean, you reek of gasoline afterwards, but she said it really helped the itching.
The gas kind of smells awesome. Let's be honest.
I love the smell.
I do too. I heard only men like that smell. They did it's like a certain smells are more appealing to certain genders.
Do you think like a woman who smells like gasoline is super sexy though?
Oh my god.
All right.
So
that's
she
okay.
she felt extremely better after the
After
gasoline
the gasoline
tincture.
Yes.
That's yeah.
All right, so I get to camp, and the first thing that they have everyone do. Now, keep in mind everything's optional, so you can opt out of anything, right? But the first thing that they'll have you do is a purge, a stomach cleanse, with a tree resin that they call sangre de grado.
Sangre de?
Grado, Grado. Yes.
So sangre de grado means blood of grade. Grade?
I mean,
Like different grades. I'm just translating. Just
right. I mean, sometimes they call it sangre de drago, so dragon's blood, right?
Dragon.
It's a tree resin, and it's blood colored. And what's interesting about sangre de grado is that you can take it internally to help the stomach and the intestines and things like that, but you can also apply it topically to nicks and cuts and scrapes, and it forms like a protective barrier, which is really interesting. So it sort of disinfects and seals wounds, right? But when you take it internally, they say that it can repair cuts and scratches and things, and it can also wash and cleanse the stomach. And so what you do is you drink about 2 or 3 fingers in a glass of sangre de grado, and then you wait, 5 minutes or so, and then you begin to chug water, and you like by the bowl full. So I had like one of those metal mixing bowls, and you use warm water because if you're chugging cold water, your stomach's gonna contract and spasm, and it's gonna be horrible. So you're chugging warm water, and you're purging. You're drinking enough water that you vomit, you throw up, and you do that for as many times as it takes for the vomit to be not foamy. So like the first couple times you throw up, your vomit is foamy,
right.
And you're doing this first thing in the morning. I mean, we got to camp sort of in the early afternoon, but they had me do it then anyway, and my stomach was empty at the time anyway.
Just out of curiosity, do they have a place where you guys vomit, or you just vomit
in
on
the
ground?
grass.
Okay.
Yeah. No, there's no special vomitorium or anything like that. You just sort of do it in the grass. And I learned that I'm really bad at chugging water to throw up multiple times. So I think I threw up probably 6 or 7 times. But eventually what happens with me is my stomach expands enough that I could drink 2 full bowls of these of water and still not throw up, and then I would start to drink a third and I would throw up, but only a little. I wouldn't like purge everything out.
Right.
And then I drink more, and the same thing would happen. Like only a little bit would come out. But apparently I did enough so that that was the first cleanse. So, in Chinese medicine, there's different schools that have different philosophies. So there's the earth school that concentrates on treating digestion, and there's the school of cold that thinks that all illnesses stem from cold invasion originally, and then there's the heat school, whatever. So there's one school called the school of attacking and purging.
Right, of course.
And that's definitely the approach that the Shipibo use. They're big into purgatives. I did 2 purgatives. So the first one was Sangre de Grado. The second one was a plant called Pinon Blanco. There was at least a week or 2 separating the 2 purges that I did. The second purge, the Pinon Blanco. So what you do is you eat the seeds, the nuts, and they taste quite good. They taste like a mixture of a pine nut, an almond, and a Brazil nut. So you eat 15 of them, you chew them up, you swallow them. But unfortunately, they're toxic. So you got to get them out.
Surprise!
And so the purging becomes even more important, and speed is necessary with this one.
So
right?
those seeds don't make you purge. You
Correct.
take them, and then
drink
you
water
have
again.
to.
You chug water again.
So why do you take them?
Again, to cleanse the intestinal tract.
So the
Cleanse
idea is
the
that they
stomach.
have some sort of effect when you take them in, but you can't leave them in.
Correct.
Got it.
You can, but the basically what they say is if you don't get them all out, Sangre de Grado is not a big deal. It'll just sort of pass through and help the intestines and things like that. Mm-hmm. If you're not able to throw up to purge all the Pinon Blanco, they can cause severe stomach and intestinal cramps and then severe diarrhea. And so eventually what happened with me is, again, I hit this wall with my purging. I think I threw up 6, 7, 8 times, and I was getting pieces of the nuts out so you could see them. And then all of a sudden, I hit this wall where I couldn't get a massive purge again. But at one point I turned to the facilitator I was working with and I was like, I need to go to the bathroom. Mm-hmm. And I went to the bathroom, had urgent diarrhea, and noticed while I was cleaning up that seed pieces had come out.
That's fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's impressive.
Super fast. So I had 4 or 5 rounds of diarrhea, and once the facilitator had called over Don Miguel, and Miguel came over and he said, no, drink, keep drinking. I'm like, Don, I can't, it's not coming out. And then the facilitator told him I had diarrhea, where I saw some of the nuts. He's like, okay, you don't need to purge anymore, right? Because they're coming out the other way. So
and the purpose of this whole thing was what exactly?
It was a cleanse. It was a cleanse for the intestines, for the stomach. So those were my first experiences with the medicine. So those two purges, and then we began a series of saunas. Basically,
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah, go.
How before you started the next step? How did you already feel a lot better?
I was going to ask the same question, man.
I mean, all right. So here's the thing. None of the medicines that I took, except for 2, which I'll describe. None of them, to me, had a huge immediate... Like, I didn't feel a huge... I felt better, but not... It wasn't like a huge, tremendous, oh my god, I feel much better type thing for me.
Right.
It was more subtle.
I also tend to not react to things very strongly,
Yeah.
so I totally get that.
Yeah. Again, there were 2 exceptions, which I'll describe in a bit. But, so we also were doing what they called vapor baths, or what the Dons would call saunas. And so what they would do is there was a little area that was a little clearing that had a roof over it, but it was open. So it was like just supporting posts with a roof over it. And this is where they would cook the medicine, but you're outdoors, you're outside. And so basically what they would do is they'd take 2 really large logs, right? Make a fire between them, and then put these gigantic pots on top of the logs. Mm-hmm. And the fire between them would heat the medicine.
Right.
And they would do 2 pots at a time. And what they had was basically a stump that you sat on with a little crossbar made of wood in front of it that you could kind of lean on. And they would bring these pots of basically boiling water with herbs in them and set them down right in front of the little crossbar area. They'd take the cover off and then they'd pull a tarp over you. And the tarp was suspended. It looked like a car with no wheels because it was suspended with a PVC pipe frame, right? And in the top of the tarp, they cut a slit so that you could stick your head out if it got too intense for you. Otherwise, they'd keep that slit covered with a blanket. Right. So basically, you're sitting in front of a steaming pot of cooking herbs.
Is there any room, or is it like you just...
I had to slouch over. Otherwise, my head would hit the roof of this sauna. And it was like a steam room. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you've ever been to a steam room at the gym, that's kind of exactly what it was like. It was like being in a steam room.
Sounds more intense.
kind of more intense because you're also in the pitch black and you're also under a very tiny tarp. And so what you're supposed to do is, and the idea is, you inhale the vapor and then you swallow it, as if you're like building a fake burp, right? And the idea is you're supposed to build up to swallowing 80 times, right? So the idea is that you're taking the medicine into your lungs and you're also taking it into your stomach. So these pots typically would have 7-10 herbs in them. Ayahuasca was often one. Plant called Toei, which I'll talk a little bit about later.
When you did the ayahuasca in the pot, do you trip the same way as you do when you drink it?
Although they say that you can, it never happened to me.
Yeah, there's some really interesting. When we get to the ayahuasca, I'll talk about it. But in the book that I told you to read, The Magicians of the Gods, he talks about ayahuasca a little bit. Mm-hmm. Not about having done it himself, but about, well, we'll get to it.
Yeah. So those were vapor baths that we did, and then when you're at the end of your stay there, you switch from doing the hot vapor baths to what I call cold baths. Now, nothing's cold in the jungle, right? It's room temperature.
Right.
So what they did was you do 3 rounds of what they called gasoline baths, which is mostly water with some plants and some gasoline as well.
I'm very curious. Where does this idea of gasoline come? Because one thing
it's
I know
spiritual, Saul.
No, I know they're not coming. The gasoline thing is not a traditional thing. So where did they start deciding, or what made them decide that gasoline is something that you need to use a lot?
I have no idea, but at some point they discovered. So gasoline is oftentimes used for protection, right? So that specific round of gasoline baths was used both to seal in the effects of the vapor baths and for protection. And then what they do as sort of a nice little gesture at the end is after you do 3 rounds of the gasoline baths, you do what they call a love bath, right? Uh-oh. And the love bath...
The whole village gets together.
All you're doing is standing, in your shorts or, I brought a bathing suit, so I was in a bathing suit. And they just dump buckets of this bath over you, right? And so the love bath was just water and herbs, plants. And it smelled amazing. It smelled so good. And everybody, you just see everybody was like glowing and happy and smiley. And after the love bath, you do 3 rounds of that. And then typically that's the end of your trip, at the end of your trip. So that was another aspect. So they're big into vapor baths, and so the vapor baths they're using to cure all kinds of lung issues, all kinds of digestive issues, joint issues, joint problems. So they were saying, if you had back problems, back pain, shoulder pain, things like that, what you could do is you could actually turn around in the sauna and face your back towards the pot, so your back would get sort of infused. And by the way, in the sauna, if you got too hot, you would say, agua por favor, so water please, and you'd stick your head, they'd take the blanket off the slit in the tarp, you'd stick your head out, they'd dump, cold water on you, and then you could go back in for as long as you could.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so they recommended staying in as long as you could. One of the other things we did while I'm thinking about it, because I tend to forget about this, is we did smoke baths, right? So basically, we did smoke baths with Palo Santo. And so there'd be a metal pot.
Just to clarify, Palo Santo is a specific type of wood that is picked up after 7 years of falling on its own that has a very aromatic and good smell, in my opinion.
Right, and it's used for smudging and cleansing and that sort of thing. And so what you do there is they'd take the Palo Santo, they'd put it in a metal pot, they would stoke it, light it on fire, they'd stoke it, they'd blow out the flames so that they were just sort of coals, which would smoke. Now, this particular smoke bath, I believe, also had a crocodile skull in it.
Because why not?
So because you're getting crocodile medicine with it as well.
No, I get it.
Basically what you do is, it's sort of a standard size pot. So you grab a blanket. Again, you're in your skivvies, so you're in your shorts or your bathing suit or whatever. And you just basically take a blanket and you get on all fours over the pot and you pull the blanket over your head. You shut your eyes and you don't breathe, right? And you just stay under that blanket for as long as you can. Typically, it's like 30 seconds to a minute. You do 3 rounds of that, and that's a smoke bath. And you feel awesome after. I felt awesome afterwards.
Awesome how?
Cleansed, light, free, Palo Santo smells amazing. Right?
does
I
smell
love
amazing.
the smell of it. So it's in your hair. It's in, if you have a beard like I do and we do. It's in your beard. It's in, on your skin. So smoke baths were also. We only really did those, I think, twice.
And this was all in. Remind me the name of the place.
So the camp was in Shipibo. It's called Incancana,
Incancana.
which is the Shipibo word for a medicinal plant called Marusa. So let's see. So we got the vapor baths, we got the smoke baths, we got the love baths, and the gasoline baths. 2 stomach purges. So about 2.5 weeks into my trip, I decided. Well, 3 of us decided that we wanted to do a medicine called sachamango. And basically, what you do. So sachamango is an extract from a seed of a plant. It's actually the 3rd washing, because the first 2 washings would be too potent. So it's the 3rd washing, and you get sort of this milky white liquid, and it's thin though. It's not it's not like milkweed.
Right.
It's water, but it has like a cloudy milky white substance in it. And so what they do is they take a teaspoon of sachamango, and they pour it in your nostril. They literally have a medicine that goes in every orifice. So this one goes up your nose, and as
that has a natural leading question after that.
The orifices I did were mouth, nose, and eyes.
Sure you did.
So
What happens in the jungle stays in the jungle.
Well, yeah. So as they pour it up your nose, you're supposed to inhale it. So what ends up happening is it goes up your nose and it burns as if you just had water up your nose, except it's not water. Picture more like wasabi.
Oof. That bad?
That bad-ish. I mean, not that bad. So some of it goes into your lungs because you're inhaling, right? Some of it goes down your throat and into your stomach. And basically my body couldn't figure out whether it wanted to sneeze or cough or burp or throw up or do all of those things at the same time, which it ended up doing a couple of times.
Nice. I was really hoping you were going to say that.
It makes a really weird noise when you do all of those at once. So anyway...
Yeah.
That noise needs a name.
So, yeah, a burp on it.
Cachapuchucan.
What did you just say?
I don't know. I made it up.
Sounded really spiritual.
Cachapuchucan. It's when you burp, sneeze, cough, vomit, and fart at the same time.
Now I imagine Rob doing that, and this is like an old, wise, wrinkly old Shipibo man in the corner going, Cachapuchucan.
He has achieved the Cachapuchucan.
He is the one!
Alright, so after about 25 minutes of intense pain, burning, and a nose that was leaking like a faucet, the 3 of us went through a roll and a half of toilet paper among the 3 of us. So that lasted for about 25-30 minutes, and I was sitting on my porch on my tombo, and the 2 others that did it with me were there as well. By the way, you're supposed to do both nostrils. All 3 of us could only do the left nostril. So I'm sitting on my porch, and all of a sudden I'm noticing my heartbeat was irregularly irregular. So it was skipping between every 5th and 10th beat. And I'm freaking out a little bit because
That's not a good sign.
I've had palpitations for years, but I've never had an arrhythmia.
Right.
And so, one of the other people that did the sachamango with me went and got the Dons. So Don Miguel and Don Enrique came. And they sort of examined me. I think Enrique felt my pulse. He also felt my abdomen under my rib cage, both left, center, and right side. And he sort of leans back and he nods his head and he says, "Sí, tu corazón tiene mucho grasa." Mucha grasa.
That translates in English to, yes, your heart has a lot of
grease.
Grease, or it's not necessarily grease. It could also be fat or oil.
Right.
But that sort of thing.
Right. So basically the way that the Dons work is in ceremony, in an ayahuasca ceremony, they are able to see your energy. Mm-hmm. And so in ceremony, Don Enrique had seen my energy body and had seen that my heart has lots of grasa, has lots of grease in it. I learned later that he wasn't necessarily talking just about my physical heart. He was talking more sort of like the Chinese medicine concept of heart. So the energetic, but includes the physical heart as well. Right. And so I mean, basically, sachamango, in Chinese medicine, there's this concept of scouring phlegm, right? So when you have a pot that has lots of, cooked on oatmeal or cooked on, lasagna, whatever, you take like a steel wool and you scour off the cooked on food, right? So that's what scouring is. And so there are herbs that scour phlegm, right? Sachamango scours phlegm, right? And we know in Chinese medicine, fat, grease, all this stuff is phlegm, right? So if my heart has lots of phlegm and I just did an herb up my nose that scours lots of phlegm, it makes sense that the heart would react pretty poorly to being scoured of its phlegm, right? So it kind of, again, having the Chinese medicine background knowledge was really helpful on me. So basically it disrupted, it bothered my heart.
Right.
And so honestly, that was a pretty life-changing moment for me. I mean, like I said, I had palpitations in the past, but nothing like this. And so the next day, they started me on a medicine that was actually a mushroom that I asked the name of, and they told me, and it's in Shipibo. They didn't know the Spanish name because their first language is Shipibo.
But it's not psilocybin, is it?
No. It was like a huge. It looked like it was reishi colored, but it didn't grow on trees. It grows from the ground, so it has a stalk, right? And they told me the name of it, but again, it was in Shipibo. I don't remember what it was, and they didn't know the Spanish name of it. So because Spanish was their second language, so they started me on this mushroom. And I was taking extracts of it, and at first it didn't taste too bad. It tasted kind of like unsweetened almond milk, right? But as tends to happen in the jungle, things ferment. Right. And by, the third and fourth day of taking this medicine, it was tough to get down.
So it's cool for you to just continue to drink this medicine as it like ferments.
Yeah.
Wow. So here's an interesting question that comes up to me. They just give whatever amount, obviously they're calculating the amount, but they just give any medicine to anybody, or are they a little bit more calculating about it? Like, are they like, oh, this one's good for you, this one you shouldn't do?
Yes.
Yes,
all of that is true. There are some medicines that everyone can do, and then there are some medicines that not everyone can do. So, for instance, Don Miguel did not let me do the right nostril of sachamango. He said, that's too strong for you. Where the other two people did the right nostril the next day.
I see.
They didn't have any heart thing.
Exactly. So I was started on this mushroom. And so what they would do is they would give me the mushroom twice a day. And on the fourth day, by my 8th dose, I was feeling sick. Mm-hmm. Nauseous, no appetite, just stomach sick.
And at the same time that you're doing this, are other things happening too?
What do you mean other things?
Well, you're not just drinking mushroom stuff all day. You're
basically
doing
only vapor baths. I wasn't doing any other.
So you're doing vapor baths and mushrooms.
And mushrooms, yeah. I wasn't doing any other medicines by mouth or any other orifice.
Except for ayahuasca, right?
Well, except for ayahuasca. But once this mushroom made
Were you doing ayahuasca throughout this whole thing?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's what's crazy about this story to me,
so
is like all these things are happening at the same time.
Yeah, I didn't realize. I thought ayahuasca was coming up next.
Yeah.
Again, I sort of mentioned this before. My brain compartmentalizes my trip into different, but they're all happening at the same time. So yeah, I did 10 ayahuasca ceremonies
throughout
the course of this trip. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Over, what was it, 3 months?
over
3 months, 5 weeks.
4 or 5 weeks. 4 weeks, really.
Yeah.
And so after taking this 8 doses of this mushroom, I felt sick. Like I couldn't eat. I had no appetite. I felt nauseous. And so they turned to me when I told them this. They turned to me and said, "Oh, good, the medicine's working."
Oh, wow.
Of course.
Yeah, it's always great. Oh, good.
Yeah. So
that's what I would do too. I was like, "Oh yeah, no, that's good. Totally. I mean, go see a doctor just in case. But like, that's good.
It's definitely supposed to do that.
It's definitely supposed to be foaming at the mouth.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pack up my stuff and go. Let me just wipe up all this furniture with this piece of cloth because fingerprints.
I mean, bad energy.
So they told me, after the mushroom made me sick, they told me to lay off medicines and ayahuasca. So I ended up skipping the ceremony the next day. They did an ayahuasca ceremony every other day.
Wow, I'm gonna definitely want to talk more about the ayahuasca because that to me is super interesting.
That's gonna be a long part.
Yeah,
that's fine.
No, it's good.
So after those 3 days, they switched me to the medicine that I'm still currently on, which is the juice of half a pomelo mixed with an egg white and blended together. So for those that don't know, a pomelo is in the grapefruit family. Except it's much milder. It's less acidic. It's less biting. Actually, the pomelo juice is quite pleasant to drink. And mixed with an egg white, it kind of gets blended with an egg white. It gets kind of foamy a little bit. Still kind of pleasant.
What's that supposed to do for you?
That's supposed to continue the process of cleansing the grease. La grasa. I'm supposed to do 100 doses, of which I've probably done about 15.
And you do how many times a day? Once a day?
Once a day, in the morning. Yep. And Don Miguel also told me that would help me lose more weight because it would curb my appetite, which it did in the jungle. Here, a little bit less so. There were once or twice where I took the juice of a whole pomelo, and that actually helped. Like, I didn't have to eat until the afternoon.
Right.
So, by the way, another shift in normalcy was it gets dark about 6:30 down there, and the days are all roughly equal in length because they're only 3 degrees south of the equator. So they're quite close to the equator. And so the days don't vary in length all that much.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing to keep in mind, by the way, is although the jungle doesn't vary that widely in temperature, it does have 3 rainy seasons, and I was there at the tail end of, so like January, February is one of their rainy seasons. Plus, February, keep in mind we're south of the equator, so February is summer down there. So all the Shipibo kids were on summer vacation. Right?
Oh,
they
that's
were
so
like
interesting.
at the tail end of their summer vacation. So they would be running around the camp and so cute. They were so cute. Anyway, so it gets dark about 6:30. They have a generator, which they turn on so the camp has electricity, but they turn it on usually between 5:30 and 7:30 p.m. And once it goes off, it's pitch black, unless you're going to use your flashlight or your headlamp or whatever. So it gets dark at 6:30, and when the generator goes off, unless you're going to waste battery power on your light or you have candles, which I didn't have, it's dark. And so we were going to sleep at like 8 o'clock.
You live with the times.
You do. You live with the sun.
Sunrise and sunset,
Absolutely.
which is a really cool thing.
And the roosters start crowing at 5:30 in the morning.
Well, you're a lucky motherfucker
So-
because when I lived in Venezuela, there were
5:30.
roosters across the street from us, and they would crow whenever the fuck they wanted.
Those assholes.
Yeah, roosters are dicks. Roosters are cocks. So they started me on this pomelo juice mixed with egg white. After 2 days, well, actually, really before even 2 days were up, I started to notice that there was kind of a sore spot right above my belly button, right above my navel, that felt like an abscess. And during the 2 days of pomelo juice, my belly button actually started leaking. So they stopped the pomelo juice and treated my leaking belly button. So basically what happened was, at first it was blood. Now, to give you some background, that had actually happened to me twice before while I was in the States. But it was just a little bit, and it would last like 2-3 days, and then it would go away. So I had it twice before. Here, though, sorry, this is going to get gross. If I pressed on my abdomen above my belly button, I could sort of squeeze out this yellowish, grayish
Pus?
Huh. like draining abscess. And I knew immediately from Chinese medicine, I knew immediately what it was. It was the grease coming out. And that's exactly actually what Don Enrique said. He said that's the grease coming out.
And why would he say that that's coming out to the belly button specifically?
I guess it just finds the quickest route. I don't know. And I guess, I have sort of a weak spot in the abdominal wall. This is just theory.
Right,
I don't know.
of course.
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
And so they started by treating it with sangre de grado, so they poured sangre de grado in it, but unfortunately, as I said before, sangre de grado seals wounds, and this abscess wasn't done draining. So it opened again, at which point they took an ampicillin, antibiotic gel cap, opened it, and poured the powder into my belly button, and then sort of wrapped it, a gauze around my belly.
Interesting.
And then they started treating it with a plant called piri piri, which I have no idea what it was. Piri piri, yeah. So that lasted a few days, but it was really intense. And then the last thing that happened on sort of the grease note is, so oftentimes if you scratch mosquito bites or chigger bites or whatever, you can get an infection.
Of course.
What they call a chupa.
Chupa. You know what that means?
To suck.
Yeah, to
Yeah.
suck.
Yeah.
Oh, like chupacabra?
That's chupacabra. Cabra is a goat.
Goat.
Chupacabra is this mythical
Goat sucker?
animal
The sucker of goats.
that essentially sucks the blood of ghosts.
Wow. I scratched a. I'll show it to you guys. Actually, I showed you, Dan, but it's about 4 or 5 inches above my ankle. About, I don't know, 2-3 inches lateral to my shin bone. So I got this abscess there, and they treated it the first time by putting a poultice of yucca, like ground up yucca.
The leaves?
No, the root.
Oh, interesting.
And someone told me later that they had heard somewhere, I don't know if this is true or not, I haven't looked it up, but that yucca root has like pseudo or semi-steroidal properties. So it brought the swelling and pain down. So that brought some of the pain and swelling down. And basically what Don Miguel did was, because it had a little scab on it, he went to a plant and he picked off a thorn, and he came over to my leg, and with the thorn he picked off the scab, or part of the scab, and squeezed it, and I almost passed out from the pain. And he squeezed some pus out of it, but he couldn't get what he called the mother, la madre, right? So la madre, the mother, is like a hard, what he described as a hard, round, white ball. And so if you've ever had a pimple that you squeeze and you think you get everything out, but then the pimple comes back, and you squeeze and squeeze and squeeze until this hard lump comes out, that's the mother.
It's like the root.
Right, like the root.
The root of the pimple.
Unfortunately,
Pimple root.
Exactly. So
My favorite band.
Pimple root.
Unfortunately,
You're listening to Pimple Root on WQXR 142.
Tune into my podcast about squeezing things. Pimple root.
Pimple Root.
Anyway,
You gotta go with these jokes, Rob, right?
I know. So unfortunately, this happened literally the last 2 days I was at camp before I left for Iquitos. So they didn't really get a chance to treat it. So basically, he told me, buy some ampicillin at the pharmacy, which they sell over the counter without a prescription there. Wait for the mother to develop, and then when it develops, squeeze it out. People in my group, when we got back to Iquitos, were getting really concerned, and eventually this one guy he had a prescription for amoxicillin, like a 10-day course, that he had for an ear infection. It was still sealed in the bottle and everything, and he didn't end up taking it for his ear. So he gave that to me, and he also had bought some antibiotic ointment that had a steroid in it, so it helped the swelling. So I don't think the mother ever got a chance to fully develop, and then long story short, I came back to the States, went to urgent care. They said, you're taking the wrong antibiotic. They switched me to Bactrim for 10 days, so I took that. And they just basically, by that time, the heat and swelling had gone down, so they didn't send me to the emergency room. And now it's just a scab. But again, in my mind, later, I had dinner with Dan and Mark Keeble, and he told me that in Master Tongue Acupuncture, that's the phlegm region, by the way, where I have this.
Yeah, I was going to say, like damp or phlegm in the stomach channel.
So this is more of la grasa to me.
La grasa.
Yeah.
Damn you, la grasa.
Yeah, I would love to speak to these people about what they mean by la grasa, because they may very well mean a very similar concept
To phlegm, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like their phlegm.
Absolutely.
That's really cool.
Basically, Don Enrique held up his water bottle and he said, if this is your heart, only like the top 2 inches didn't have grease. Talking about my heart. Yeah. And then what's funny is his brother the next day told me Enrique has the same thing, because apparently he loves fried chicken, he loves French fries, his diet's not that great either. And he said he only had like an inch of the top of his heart that didn't have grease. So we were taking the same medicine actually.
And how does that correlate to living, to life? What does having grease in your heart do to you, according to Don Miguel?
I don't know. We didn't have a conversation about that, to be honest. And, the other part that I found kind of interesting was there was absolutely no judgment about it. There was no, you need to lose weight. There was no, you need to change your diet. There was no, the only thing that came up about it was what I already said. He said the pomelo juice will help you lose more weight because it'll suppress your appetite somewhat. But there was no, you need to change your lifestyle. I didn't get a lecture like I would get from a Western doctor. Like, oh, you need to lose weight and you need to change your diet and you need to do this and that and the other thing. Yeah. So it was really
Supportive.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a nice thing to have.
Yeah.
Because they can acknowledge that they have similar problems and that they're not any better than you.
Yeah, exactly, and that they're taking the same medicines that they were prescribing to us. So that was kind of nice. So in terms of medicine, because I know we want to move to other topics, but the only other medicine that I really did was jungle basil.
Jungle basil.
Yeah, so it's in the basil family, and what you do is you go and you pluck, 8-10 leaves, usually the smaller leaves at the top. You kind of squish them, you macerate them in your hand, you grind them up, and then
It's a family show, Rob.
you
I was thinking the same thing. Like, really? You macerate them in your hand?
So once you do that, you squeeze a drop out, and you squeeze a drop into your eye, into each eye, and it stings a little bit. It's not like horrible.
And the purpose?
To help your vision.
And did it help your vision?
It did, actually. I remember I had my glasses off, and my vision's terrible without my glasses. But I remember it was a lot clearer after doing the
And did
jungle
that
basil.
go away after a little bit?
Kind of, because I've been wearing my glasses.
How long were you in the? How many days were you in the camp?
So I was there from February 3rd is when I arrived to March 4th.
So a month.
So a month, yeah.
Right. That still fits into the 5-week model.
Well, plus there was travel. We stayed like overnight in Iquitos,
Right.
and then there was travel days.
Okay, so through this whole thing, you were doing ayahuasca.
Yes, right.
Let's get into that a little bit.
Okay.
First of all, was that your first time doing ayahuasca?
It was. It was my first.
Did you have any expectations when you were going into the ayahuasca
No.
ceremony? No expectations whatsoever.
I expected to hallucinate
That's it.
and
It's a good expectation.
and probably throw up. Those
And
were my
did you
two
have
expectations.
did you have a sort of idea of what you wanted to happen? Not an expectation per se, but like, I'm doing ayahuasca because I want this. Because I feel like a lot of people do go into it that way.
Well, what you do is they tell you set an intention.
Oh, I see.
For each ceremony, each time you drink, set an intention for what you would like to work on or to know, or some healing or whatever it is. So
How many ceremonies did you do total?
I did 10 ceremonies, and yeah, ayahuasca is really interesting. So basically what would happen is we'd go into a building called a maloca, which is kind of a round building with a
Dome.
ice cream cone shaped roof.
I
right?
see.
And you sit on foam mats on the floor. So Don Miguel, Don Enrique would sit on mats in the middle of the maloca, and then there was a sort of semicircle of mats around the perimeter in front of them. And the ceremonies would start at 7:30 every time. And like I said, there was a ceremony every other night, right? I didn't attend every single one. I think I probably skipped 5 or 6, all told. And I mean, these guys have been drinking ayahuasca since they were like tweens, like 12. I think Enrique started his training when he was 12.
And how old are they now?
Late 40s.
13.
At least like 14
At least
and a
like
half.
14. They're late 40s.
Wow, okay. So they've been doing this for a long time.
For like 30 years.
And are they doing ayahuasca every other day for 40 years?
Yes. Well, no. When the groups, when there are groups of people there,
I was going to say, it's probably
they're
not
drinking
good
every
to
other
do that.
night.
Yeah, okay.
Well, yeah. Anyway, ayahuasca is very interesting stuff. So my first ceremony, they sort of walked me through what to expect. So ceremony would start at 7:30 every night. So they'd shut the generator. It's pitch black unless there's a full moon or most of a moon out, which there was. There was a full moon while I was there, and otherwise, other than moonlight pouring in through the windows, it was pitch black. Right. So you come in, you sit on your mat. At the foot of each mat was a bucket that had like an inch or two of water just to lend stability to the bucket. And that was your best friend.
Oh, Mr. Bucky.
So basically...
Bucky the Bucket.
Oh, Bucky.
Yeah, Bucky. So basically, I threw up every single time I drank ayahuasca. Most of the time I threw up twice. Occasionally I would throw up 3 times. As a matter of fact, my visions, if I was gonna have visions that ceremony, because every ceremony was different, if I was gonna have visions, my visions didn't start until I threw up the first time.
Interesting.
I typically purged. I was typically the first person to throw up and it was typically within 15 or 20 minutes of drinking.
So tell me a little bit about your visions. What were you seeing? I'm assuming every time was different, as you're saying.
Every time was different. Yeah.
You could start us just with the first one, because
Sure.
that's obviously going to be the most intense, different experience from anything you've ever had.
So the two ceremonies with the most visions and the best ceremonies were my first one and my last one.
Oh, awesome.
So my first ceremony, after I purged, I started getting visions of jungle animals.
Well, can I first ask you, before you get into the jungle animals,
Sure.
you said there was an intention you had to set before the ceremony. What was your intention on the first ceremony, if you don't mind sharing?
I don't, actually. My intention was to help me to connect with the plant spirits and with my own guides.
Okay.
Right, and my higher self.
Okay, so you puke
Which
and
Alan
you're...
Watts says is bullshit, the higher self. So anyway...
yeah, well, I'm a huge Alan Watts fan, but yeah, he's like, everything's bullshit.
Yeah.
He's very zen. He's very into the zen type stuff. Not only zen, but that makes sense. He says there's no such thing as the ego as well.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway,
Yeah.
So you puke and you start thinking about forest animals. Go on.
So I start to see jungle animals in specific. So I saw jaguar, I saw anaconda,
That's so interesting. Those are the two animals that I hear a lot spoken about: the jaguar and the snake.
Yep.
Wow, so interesting.
I would see a couple of. I think I saw a bat. I saw an alien for sure. Like a stereotypical alien,
Like gray with the big black eyes.
Yeah. Except
Are you...
all of these animals, including the alien, had glowing yellow eyes.
Glowing yellow eyes.
Yeah.
Are you
Glowing
communicating with these animals at all, or you're just
Not
seeing
these.
them?
These were sort of like in a movie. You know what a jump cut is? How they cut very quickly between different scenes.
Yeah.
Among different scenes. That was like one after the other. They would just flow into my vision and then fade, and then the next one would come.
Is it
Go ahead. No, please.
Is it like they were there with you? Like, oh shit, there's a jaguar right here? No.
It was just visions of their heads and mostly their eyes.
But when you say, so this is the thing, like I've never had like a true blue hallucination. It's like, is it like in front of you there and you're like, oh shit, and then it goes away? Or is it like in your mind's eye? Or like what's the...
No, it's so okay. So here's the cool thing about ayahuasca. If you want to delve into the visions, you close your. For me, let me speak in the first person. If I wanted to delve into my visions, I would close my eyes and we'd go on a ride, right? And I'll tell you about an experience I had with this in 1 second in my first ceremony. If you wanted to sort of cancel a vision or come out of a vision, I could open my eyes, and in the very dim light, whatever I could make out, I could focus on, and the visions would sort of fade into the background. I would still sort of see them like washed out, but they would. I never felt out of control.
That's good.
That's an interesting thing to hear.
Except for one ceremony, and it actually wasn't visions, and I'll describe that. It was like my third. It wasn't my second. I think it was my third or fourth ceremony, and it was physical sensations that I felt out of control. And I'll describe that because I actually had to cancel that ceremony.
During the part that you've described thus far with the animals, do you feel that you were learning anything from seeing these animals, or you were just seeing them simply and just that was it?
I'll be honest with you. This felt like, and again, it's so personal. You know, whether the visions come from the spirit of ayahuasca, or whether they come from your own subconscious, or whether it's some interplay of those things,
or whether there's any difference between the two,
for sure. This felt like ayahuasca trying to intimidate / sort of scare / sort of impress me, because I mean these animals, they were not like friendly. Oh, I'm the spirit of the jaguar. It was like fangs bared, like threatening poses. You know, the snake had its fangs out, like scary visions, glowing glowing yellow eyes. So it felt like I am ayahuasca. You know, like that's the energy.
Yeah, it's like, just so you know, this is who you're messing with.
Right, exactly. And so you guys know me. Those that don't, I'm a huge nerd. Darth Vader came into my vision. I mean, at one point in my first ceremony, I had the Jetsons show up. I had scenes from Lord of the Rings show up.
So all sorts of visions.
All sorts of visions, yeah. But in the beginning, it was really scary. And I'll tell you, when I opened my eyes, like when I halted, was when I started seeing swastikas. when swastikas started to appear, I was like, nope, cancel. I opened my eyes. I was like, and I was able to sidestep that.
What was it about that you were like, no?
I was like, I just didn't want that whole Nazi Holocaust. I didn't want that energy in my ceremony.
You're the second person who's done a ceremony who's told me a situation like that. He didn't have swastikas per se, but he had an experience where he essentially describes it as being in the Holocaust as a victim, and he describes it almost as if it was his past life, and he remembers the whole thing, like he's there and he's in the Holocaust and he's starving and his family and all this stuff. Really interesting that comes up to you also. But anyway, go on.
Yeah, I'm sure it's. I don't know if I had a past life there, like what the deal is or whatever. But the Holocaust has had a huge impression on me in this current life. Anyway, I canceled that. Like, I opened my eyes. I was like, no, we're not going there. And it stopped. And then when I closed my eyes again, ayahuasca shifted and she became very playful. Like, so she appeared to me, actually. And at some point she became very playful and she took on the appearance of like a cartoon female devil with like a little pitchfork and a pointy tail, and but she was wearing like dominatrix leather.
I like where this is going.
It was really, no, they weren't sexual, really, the visions, but just super playful. I mean, she was a cartoon, and there were some other, so like I said, I had some scenes from Lord of the Rings come in, and some other cool things happen, and I had that scene from the Jetsons randomly pop into my head. To tell you about the last part of the visions that I remember, I need to pause and segue onto a different topic.
Let's do it.
So one of the major benefits to being at this particular camp is that they have access to a very spiritual, very holy tree. They sort of ask us not to talk so much about it, just because they want people to be able to experience it, but they don't want people coming in and taking advantage of it and like start hacking off pieces of the tree and whatnot. But suffice it to say, in Shipibo culture, they are big into plant spirits, and there's sort of a quote-unquote holy trinity of plant spirits in the jungle. And at the top of this trinity, the queen of the jungle is this tree called Noya Rao.
Noya Rao.
And Noya Rao has...
Now, is it cool for us to put this out there? Because I could take this off if you want. I still want to hear it, but I could take it off if you prefer.
Let me think about it, but So Noya Rao... I mean, many Shipibo don't even think that the tree exists anymore. They think it's extinct. But there's actually 3 trees on this property. There's 3 Noya Rao trees on this property. And basically what happens is when the leaves fall, and sometimes it happens to the bark as well, there's some kind of fungus, or I think it's a fungus, something that acts on the leaves and makes them bioluminesce. So they glow. Wow. So they glow at night. Sometimes the bark glows. The bark didn't glow for me when I was there at night. It was just the leaves. So this is leading to the bigger topic of plant diets, right? So when the Shipibo do a plant diet, right? So there's the ayahuasca diet, and that's the diet that you follow when you're about to do an ayahuasca ceremony. But there are also plant diets. And plant diets are dietas, right? Which are designed to take in the plant in physical form. So we were drinking extracts of Noya Rao root bark. So they would scrape the bark off the roots, put them in water, and you would drink the water that had the root bark soaking in it. Mm-hmm. And so you drink an extract of the plant. Now, when you start a dieta, you fast for at least 48 hours. Right? Now, for me, I had never done a fast more than a day and a half in my life. Right?
Is this a fast with water or
water fast? Yeah. You can dry fast, no water. I was like, that is not happening, because if I dehydrate, it's game over for me. Right? For
sure.
So I ended up fasting for 6 days. And it was fairly easy for me. Like, I had lots of reserves. I'm overweight and had plenty of grasa to digest while I was fasting. So fasting was easy for me. And the diet we were eating was really restricted. So it's no oil, no salt, no sugar, no spicy food. There's also diet related, no sex on the diet. Now that being said, it's no added salt, no added sugar, no added oil. So you could like
natural stuff.
Natural stuff. So you could eat banana, you could eat fruit,
Right.
which had sugar in it, right? It's just no added things. And so the plant spirit explanation is that the plants live in a world where they can't taste anything. They can smell things apparently because they hate actually human body odor, and so the sex thing, they actually hate the smell of sexual fluids, both male and female. So that sort of disturbs them. But they live in a flavorless world. So that's one explanation. The other explanation is that salt and sugar and these things sort of dull your ability to sense energy and to communicate with the spirits. So I opened my diet, fasted for 6 days, but I was doing ayahuasca ceremonies during this. So I was drinking extracts of the Noya Rao bark, drinking water, and doing ayahuasca ceremonies. That was it, right? And so in my first ayahuasca ceremony, at some point, ayahuasca's like, okay, I want you to meet my sister. And she pulls back this curtain, and sitting behind the curtain at a table on a balcony was this beautiful woman dressed in like a glowing, seamless white robe. And I knew automatically that this was Noya Rao.
Wow.
And so I don't unfortunately remember what the conversation was about, but we had a conversation. And I was later told that it's actually kind of rare to meet Noya Rao, especially in your first ceremony.
All right, so it's your first day doing ayahuasca. You have all these visions.
Right.
Now, my next question is, after you're done with the ceremony, and in my experience, again, not in doing it myself, but in speaking to a lot of people who have, their larger experience tends to be more after the ceremony, when it's over, rather than during the ceremony. Did you have any sort of feelings or special moment when the ceremony was over, or not really?
No, not for me. So what would happen is I'd get visions, and the visions would last only partway through the ceremony, and then they'd fade. Now, to be fair, I would drink half a cup of ayahuasca. I wouldn't drink the full cup.
I see.
I
Every time?
Every time.
Because you what?
Because I couldn't drink a full cup. So here's the deal with my experience with ayahuasca. The first time I drank it, I was like, oh, this isn't so bad. Like, this doesn't taste so bad. What is everybody complaining about? And that's one of the guys there, this guy Nicholas, who is from Sweden. He was like, yeah, that's what happens to everybody. He's like, the first time you drink it, it's not so bad. The next time it's worse. The next time it's worse, and it gets worse and worse. Because what happens is your body learns to associate the taste of ayahuasca with purging.
I see.
Right? And so every time you drink it, it's to the point now where if I actually think about and focus on drinking ayahuasca, I will physically gag.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So let's go through, instead of going through every experience, because that would obviously take forever and it won't end up on the podcast, give me sort of any highlights that you think through, with the exception of the last experience, which you said was one of the more intense ones.
Yes.
That you'll get more into in a minute. But throughout all the other ceremonies, were there any particular moments that stand out to you that you would like to share?
Yes, absolutely. So I think it was my second ceremony was very cool because I felt like it was a co-creative experience. So it was me and ayahuasca. So I almost felt like I could call a vision to mind, and ayahuasca would color it in and bring it to 3 dimensions, right? So it felt very co-creative. And by the way, on this note of creative, I keep relating it to that movie Half Baked, when they're describing all the different pot smokers, and Jeanine Garofalo comes, and she's the creative pot smoker, so she like smokes up to get creative. Ayahuasca, I've never been more creative in my life than when I've done ayahuasca. I think it was my first ceremony. I got an idea for a song.
Yeah.
I got an idea for a TV sitcom. I got an idea for a fantasy novel. In later ceremonies, I got a very clear picture of a fantasy setting, right? And then I had ideas in later ceremonies for 2 comic books or graphic novels.
Well, please write all of these, and then you can come on the show and we can talk about it and you can promote it. Assuming anybody listens to this show.
Well, for sure. What I'd like to do is pitch my comic book ideas to, or at least one of the 2 of them.
Wow.
He's never done that before.
That is...
So Dan has a couple pet rats, and they just figured out how to open the cage, and it was pretty impressive.
You watched the whole thing, right?
Yeah, that was amazing. I think that cage is useless now.
So I'd like to pitch one of my 2 graphic novel ideas to an artist, a comic book artist. But anyway, whatever.
Yeah.
So creative. I mean, the ideas would just not stop flowing. So that was my second ceremony. My third, I think it was my third. It was either my third or my fourth ceremony. Was the one that I had to cancel. And so what I mean is the physical symptoms of the ayahuasca got way too intense. And so, for example, it felt like there were wings beating in my ears, like bat wings or locust wings or something like that. And I got this tremendous pressure pressing on my chest, right? So it kind of felt like a panic attack, right? I felt like I couldn't breathe. I felt this intense pressure on my head. And I would break out into round after round of cold sweats. And I mean entire body cold sweats. I also got nauseous but couldn't throw up. So eventually, after like 8 or 9 rounds of cold sweats, I was like, screw this, I have to cancel the ceremony. And the way you do that is you drink water. Drinking water like cancels the effect of the ayahuasca.
Interesting.
Later the next morning I learned from one of the facilitators, she was like, oh, that's just la mareación. So...
Mareado means dizziness.
But they also use it to mean drunk or high.
I see.
Yeah.
That must be more of a Peruvian thing. That's not
a Venezuelan thing. Yeah. So, you'd say, oh my God, I'm so mareado right now. And so she told me that if that happens again, call over one of the facilitators and have them sople you. So sople means to blow, right? Soplar means to blow. But so they come over and they would blow mapacho smoke on you. Either that or they would blow this weird substance called agua de Florida,
which is gasoline.
It's not.
It's literally water from Florida.
It's
agua de Florida.
It's not gasoline, but it's a perfume that apparently was invented in the early 1800s that for some reason Amazonian shamans use for like protection purposes.
We had some in that room in there.
This kind of brings me to what I was talking when we first started recording with Graham Hancock. He talks about ayahuasca and how it's not a water-soluble product, so it's very interesting that these tribes would have at all been able to create it without some sort of scientific knowledge. So, I mean, the entire book alleges that there was an advanced civilization that existed before what we think is the first civilizations. And I honestly don't know where I was going with that. I just thought it was an interesting fact, but go on.
So, by the way, interesting note about ayahuasca. So, ayahuasca is not just the ayahuasca vine, right? So,
it's not just the what? Yeah, I know.
The vine.
That's what he's talking about. So, it's like this whole thing that you have to do that you would need to have scientific knowledge. And I think what brought me to it in the first place is that you said that you cancel it by drinking water and that they would even know that, that's not so crazy because that's obviously what you're going to do. I'm not feeling well, let me drink some water. But still the whole thing, the same thing with the poison curare, it's this very specific way of doing it and you're like, how would they possibly know how to do this without some sort of, this wouldn't be like something that somebody discovers.
Right.
This is something that would take years and years and years and years of studying to be able to do.
Yeah.
Anyway, go on.
Now, one of the other kind of funny things, I believe it was that same ceremony. I was getting visions, by the way. It was just the physical sensations were crazy. And one of my biggest fears in ceremony was shitting my pants, like on the mat. And so
it
never happened. Like, it never happened, thank God. But there were several ceremonies where after the ceremony was over, I would like run to the bathroom. But anyway, ayahuasca started playing on this fear. So I had this one vision based on my fear of shitting my pants. I was on a Japanese game show.
That's too perfect.
This is where it starts.
Enough said.
And attached to the back of my pants was a basketball rim, the rim of a basketball hoop. And across the stage from me was a toilet bowl that had another basketball rim around around the top. And the audience would take bets on whether or not, on basically which hoop I would shit into, right? Whether I would shit my pants before I made it to the toilet or whether I can
you
make
might be confusing your vision with an actual Japanese game show.
Yeah, can you shit?
it. Okay.
あなたはの人です
And of course, you know, there's a Japanese narrator who's like the color commentator. Oh, Willie, make it! He's gone 5 steps. You know, like the whole thing.
Yeah.
I'm kind of laughing. By the way, ayahuasca can be very funny. Like,
Yeah,
it
sounds
can
like
be
it.
very funny in ceremony. I'll come
You're
back
only
to
the
that.
second person who's ever recounted funny visions to me.
Really?
But there's a comedian / artist. I can't remember his name right now. I think it might be David Chen or Chang or something like that. He
I thought
talks.
you were just going to go. I think it might be David.
It might be Dave.
Oh, yeah,
He talks about how ayahuasca like showed up and it looked like an alien, and he's Asian, and the alien was just like, Dave, you know Asian girls have the tightest pussies, right? Like, and he was
I
like,
think you told me that story.
he was like, what? He was like, I thought that was true, and like he's like talking to this alien about this. And he's like, why is that? And the alien's like, well, because Asian guys have really small dicks. And like this is like the conversation he's having with ayahuasca, like tripping balls. It's like so weird.
All right, and did you have any other like? So let's just jump into the last ceremony.
Right. So flash forward, because there were a series of 4 or 5 ceremonies where I really didn't get much in the way of visions. I got high, but I didn't really get visions. My last ceremony was absolutely incredible. So it started the same way as my bad ceremony, right? So I got the nausea, I got the crushing, the mareación was crushing me. By the way, if I lied down, it would get worse.
Mm.
So I had to stay upright. But I knew this time that I had to call over one of the facilitators and asked for soap play. So I did that. So she came over, she soap played me, I threw up, and felt immediately better.
The crushing just disappeared.
The crushing disappeared. I felt like I broke through to the clouds.
Yeah, cool.
Through the clouds. So I started having visions. I had this awesome vision. Ayahuasca took me to this planet that was see-through. It didn't really exist in the physical plane.
Cool.
So I landed on this planet in a city with people, but like I could only really see their outlines and then sort of a fuzzy, blurry color inside their outlines, and everything was like that. The buildings, the roads. And what was super interesting was, I remember I bent over at one point and I touched, the road was like a cobblestone road. And I touched the road, and if my mind wanted the road to be solid, it was like touching a solid road, right? But then, if I didn't want it to be solid, I could totally pass my hand through it.
That's a fascinating thing.
Yeah, it was really awesome. It was really trippy. And so I was standing there.
Why do you think she took you there, though?
I'm not sure. I'm honestly not sure. I think in my mind, this went to a place like, you know how they say there were advanced civilizations, like on Venus there was a civilization of beings, and now they've transcended the physical and they only exist in the, you know,
But this is
plane.
yeah. But I'm asking because I'm like, you know, this was supposed to be for you. This was like a spiritual journey.
Mm-hmm.
So like, you know, in your mind, I'm sure that was the intention that you set, and like that's her response. So what does that mean?
I mean, I think it was showing me perhaps mankind's destiny. I mean, because these beings, they didn't speak; they communicated telepathically. I spoke to them, but they communicated to me telepathically. So there was kind of this harmony there that.
It's very interesting to think about it, because we always go and we go, oh, is there alien life out there? And it's not to say that this is the case, but the idea that there could be alien life in a form that we don't even conceptualize, like this transparent world with these transparent beings that we can barely see. We'd see that and we'd be like, oh, that's just a reflection of something.
Right.
And we would never actually put 2 and 2 together and say, this is another being from another planet.
Right.
Because we assume that if something is going to exist, it's going to exist in the same form that we are, which is not fair.
Right.
So, all in all, your whole experience in Peru, how would you say it changed you?
So it changed me in a couple of ways. First of all, the plant medicine that I worked with, particularly that special tree, I know for a fact was also working on my girlfriend up here.
She wasn't with you.
She was not with me. She was home in New Jersey and I was in Peru. But when I came back to this, I kind of left the door open on our relationship. So I said, listen, I really don't know what I'm gonna be like when I get back from Peru. But honestly, she had a tough time for the first part of my trip, and then something shifted for her. And when I got back, like, we totally fell in love all over, like head over heels. That's in love with each other. And our we've been super, super close, and
that's great.
It's been amazing. It's been amazing ever since. So that was a huge one. And then I lost 40 pounds in the jungle.
Yeah, you look great, by the way.
Thank you. And my focus has really become right now developing. I have a background in nutrition, so my RD certification, I need to get continuing ed credits sort of on a quick basis.
Right.
But my focus is now nutrition, personal nutrition, and it's really about developing a healthy relationship with food, about cooking. So I've cooked many of my own meals, except we took a trip to Florida, so we had to eat, eat out and things.
To get some agua de Florida.
Yeah, exactly. Yum. So really my focus has become health and particularly diet and food related, and
how about your outlook on life in general? Do you feel like that's changed?
I'm the happiest that I've been potentially in my entire adult life.
That's really, really nice to hear.
Yeah, I feel amazing. I love my relationship. My romantic relationship, and I'm happy. I'm super happy. I'm super excited for the future. I'm super excited about the journey and all the amazing food that I'm gonna make and cook and eat, and I'm super, super happy. It was a great experience.
That sounds unbelievable. I'm super happy to hear that.
Yeah.
Let's end it on that note, because that's an amazing note. Thank you so much for coming, Dan. Thanks so much for hosting us at your place. Anytime.
Doing
this with us. Do you guys wanna? You can do a sign out. Go do a sign out.
Bye.
Thanks for having me, Saul. It's been a great experience. You're a great interviewer.
Yeah. I was hoping something for more like Boom. You want like a slogan? Yeah. You do your own. Everybody. That's what. Maybe that's what I'll do. I'll have everybody like do their because people are like I don't know. That'll be the slogan. This is the Generalist. I don't know.
Hey guys, thank you so much for listening. A few things, same as usual. If you want to support the show, help us out by using our Amazon link located on the donate page or under each episode in the show notes. You can donate directly to the show using PayPal. That's also on the donate page. It's also under every show notes. Rate us on iTunes. If you have any comments, send us an email at thegeneralistpodcast@gmail.com. I did that right for the first time. Check us out on Twitter at The Generalist PC. Check us out on Facebook at The Generalist Podcast. Check us out on Instagram at The Generalist Podcast. Same, yeah. And I have a blog on the website if you guys ever want to check it out. I don't write there often, but every so often I have something that I want to get out of my head and onto paper, and I throw it on there. If you're interested at all, I actually only have one article on there right now called Please Waste Your Vote. Check it out. Otherwise, I'll see you in 2 weeks. I'll release a new episode. Don't know what it is yet. Thank you so much for listening, and I have nothing else to say about that.
At the top, at the peak.
Hold on 1 second.
Yeah.
Let that Oh, the siren.
The siren
go. And in the meantime, I'm gonna fix my seat
And I'm gonna fart and scratch my leg.
Everyone just have this. 2 minute break. My hemorrhoids are acting up.
I'll massage them for you later.
Anybody want to massage my hemorrhoids? I don't really need a massage. I just need a little bit of a scratch. Nothing too serious, otherwise it bleeds.
You guys want some of this piss?
What's that?
I said, do you guys want some of this piss?
Yeah, I'll take some of that piss. Some of that urine water.
Urine.
Urine. Yeah, I still have a Spanish soda thing.
Spanish.
Soda española.
Spanish soda.
Spanish soda. Where am I going?
The bus?
It's gone now.
It's a garbage truck, actually.
It's a garbage bus.
It's a garbage bus.
Did you say bus?
garbage. He transports garbage. That's cool.
That's racist, Tall.
Well, since this bus is here, I'm gonna roll a cigarette.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, let's 5-minute break. Smoke it.
Yeah, this thing could actually take a while. This thing comes around a lot.
Son of a bitch. All right, just to recall, we're talking about chiggers. I'm glad you brought that up because that's what this episode is actually about.
The tri-beard.
The tri-beard. I'm so happy you have a beard again.
Someone texted me a picture of a company called Three Guys with Beards.
That sounds like
sweet.
we own it.
It actually looks like us.
It
It's
actually
weird.
looks like us. Wow, that's amazing.
That's weird.
But I guess maybe Three Guys with Beards.
Always look the same.
Maybe. You know how those white people are.
Us white guys.
Oh wow, that's pretty cool.
All right, and the deleted version from here, or whatever. You get me, because you're me.
Wow, I'm gonna have to edit this a lot.